The city woke like a giant stretching under the sun, its glass towers shimmering with pride. Below, the streets whispered with dust, carrying the stories of ancestors long gone. Here, the past lingered in the cracks of the earth, watching silently as modern dreams rose into the sky. The wind seemed to murmur, "Do not forget where you come from," as it passed through both marketplaces and the gated walls of wealth. At the heart of the city, perched on land that once sang with the voices of elders, the academy stood tall, a gleaming palace of ambition. Its walls were cold and smooth, but they hid the memories of ceremonies, dances, and prayers that had once blessed the soil. The school's gates opened each morning with the promise of power and status, yet the spirits of the land stirred beneath, reminding the world that nothing is ever truly forgotten. One by one, children arrived in vehicles that roared like lions, stepping out with the confidence of kings and queens. Their uniforms were crisp, their shoes polished, and their eyes sharp with judgment. Some whispered as they passed, tossing sideways glances at peers who dared not wear gold or carry diamonds. They were heirs to fortunes, heirs to influence, and they wore their privilege like armor. In this kingdom of wealth, no one questioned who belonged or who did not. Then she appeared. A girl whose shoes carried the dust of long, weary streets and whose dress carried the quiet scent of modesty. She stepped lightly, almost as if the ground itself bowed to her presence. Heads turned, not with admiration, but with surprise. How could one so simple walk among them without fear? Her gaze was steady, her posture humble, yet there was a weight to her that none could ignore. She did not carry jewels or gadgets, yet there was a richness in her spirit that shone brighter than gold. Back in her small home, her grandmother had pressed her hands into hers and said, "Remember, child, the blood that runs through you carries wisdom older than these walls. Walk with dignity, for even when the world laughs, your roots will never fail you." Her words were soft, yet they thundered in the girl's heart. She carried the strength of generations in her chest, the quiet knowledge that what she lacked in wealth, she held in truth. Every day had shaped her, every hardship tempered her soul. She rose before the sun, worked with care, and learned from the elders of her neighborhood, who spoke in stories and riddles, teaching patience and honor. Even in silence, she commanded respect. Those who mocked her would never understand that her power was not in coins or luxury, but in resilience, intelligence, and the fire of her spirit. As she entered the academy, eyes followed her, curious, judgmental, wary. Whispers spread like wind. Who is she? Why is she here? There was a quiet wall built between her and the children of wealth, one that no words could breach. Yet she did not flinch. She carried herself with grace, aware that their stares were hollow, for they did not see the fullness of her soul. The divide was visible, hearts split by pride, eyes blinded by status, but she walked on, steady as the ancestors who watched over her. In that moment, the girl and the city met, a meeting of dust and glass, of the past and the present. And though the academy had been built to shape the powerful, it was she, humble and quiet, who carried the first signs of a power that could not be bought, sold, or mocked. The halls of the academy buzzed with voices, but among them, some voices carried sharpness like knives hidden in silk. "Look at her shoes," one student whispered, loud enough for the nearest classmates to laugh. "Did she step out of a dust storm?" A chorus of laughter rose, sharp and cutting, echoing off the polished walls. It was not just amusement, it was a weapon, a way to show power, to remind her that in this world, wealth was worth more than heart. She felt the words brush against her like thorns, but she did not flinch. Each insult sank into the walls of her mind, solidifying her quiet resolve. The laughter followed her, chasing her between classrooms, down long hallways, and across sunlit courtyards. Every step she took was a careful dance, avoiding eyes that judged and hearts that had already decided she did not belong. The teachers walked past, faces polite but distant, their gazes favoring the children who carried leather bags, gold watches, and the confidence of inheritance. Not a word was spoken to intervene, not a glance that might have offered protection. Silence became a loud echo of injustice, a chorus that seemed to confirm what the students already believed: the world belonged to those who wore crowns of wealth. Yet beneath her calm exterior, a storm brewed quietly. Her hands did not tremble, her shoulders did not stoop. She endured, each word of ridicule absorbed, stored like seeds in fertile soil, waiting for the right season. There was a depth in her eyes, a strength that no mocking voice could touch. Some of the older students noticed it, a certain gravity in her presence, but they chose to ignore it, blinded by their own arrogance. That evening, when the shadows of the city grew long, she returned home to the small courtyard where her grandmother sat, weaving stories as if threading life itself through her fingers. "You walked among lions today," her grandmother said softly, eyes glinting like polished stones. "And yet, they did not see what moves within you. Remember, child, your roots reach farther than their crowns. Never forget who you are." Her voice carried the weight of generations, a warning wrapped in mystery. The girl nodded, feeling the power of those words sink into her bones. Something ancient stirred inside her, a secret whispered by the elders of the earth, waiting for its time. For now, she remained silent, enduring, learning. But the dust on her shoes, the laughter that followed her like a shadow, and the echo of injustice only hinted at the force that slept quietly within her. One day, those roots would awaken, and the world would remember that power does not come from wealth alone. From the moment the morning bell rang, the academy pulsed like a living thing, alive with whispers and laughter sharp enough to cut. The children of wealth moved in groups, each step measured, each glance calculated. Soon, their amusement turned toward her, a quiet girl whose shoes carried the dust of the streets she came from. "Why do you even try to sit here?" one girl sneered, tossing her expensive pen across the desk. "This is not your world." The girl looked up briefly, her eyes steady, but she did not answer. Her silence was not weakness, it was a shield, a wall built from years of listening to the stories of her ancestors, stories of dignity, patience, and endurance. It was then that the rival appeared, walking with a confidence that demanded attention. Her hair shone like polished ebony, her uniform pristine, her every movement declaring the power inherited from her family. She approached the girl, a smile thin as a knife. "You're out of place here," the rival said, her voice echoing through the hall. "Do you know what it means to sit among kings and queens?" The girl said nothing, but her eyes met the others with a quiet fire. The words only fueled the rival's pride, and with a flick of her hand, she rallied the others. Books were knocked to the floor, chairs shifted, and whispers turned to laughter. The academy, normally a place of learning, became a battlefield, where wealth and arrogance faced the unyielding dignity of a girl who knew her worth. In the moments when the laughter cut deepest, the girl remembered her grandmother's voice, echoing in her mind like a drumbeat of wisdom. "Child, honor is in silence, and strength is in restraint. Let the world shout. You must walk in your own power." She absorbed every cruel glance, every whispered insult, letting them fall like rain upon dry earth, rooting herself instead of breaking. There was a rhythm to her calm, a quiet command of presence that even the teachers, though silent, could not ignore. Yet their silence also confirmed the imbalance. The world often rewarded those who wore crowns of wealth, and ignored those who carried crowns of character. The clash became more than personal. Every joke, every public humiliation, revealed the tension between old ways and new illusions. Tradition, patience, and inner honor met with arrogance, glitter, and entitlement. The hallways became a theater for this collision, showing the invisible line between heritage and the shine of silver spoons. And through it all, the girl held her ground. Her shoulders straight, her gaze calm, she embodied a quiet power. In her silence, she spoke louder than any jeer. In her patience, she carried the strength of generations. She was small in stature, perhaps, but immense in spirit, a reminder that the old ways, rooted in wisdom, could stand firm even when faced with a blinding glow of wealth. The girl walked the halls of the academy like a shadow with a purpose, yet everywhere she turned, eyes followed her, curious, skeptical, dismissive. Each whispered insult, each sideways glance, pressed against her like a stone on her chest. She felt the weight of being different in a world that refused to accept her, a burden carried in silence, heavy yet steadfast. In the classrooms, her mind became her armor. She solved problems before the teachers could finish speaking, her answers precise, thoughtful, and unexpected. A student snorted from the back row. "How can she know so much? She doesn't even own half the books we have." The girl smiled faintly, her eyes calm, betraying no anger. Knowledge, she knew, was more precious than any gold or gadget. Her mind was sharper than the richest treasure, honed by curiosity, patience, and the stories her grandmother had told under flickering lanterns, tales older than time, speaking of courage, honor, and justice. During lessons on history and geography, she spoke of rivers not found in textbooks, of animals and plants with wisdom hidden in their patterns. The baobab bends not for the wind, but for the earth, she explained softly, and even teachers paused, struck by her insight. There was something in her words, a rhythm that hinted she understood more than human lessons could teach. Outside, in the school gardens, she wandered quietly, and the birds ceased their chatter when she passed. Small animals approached her without fear, and even the stray cats of the courtyard curled near her feet as though acknowledging an invisible authority. Students whispered that it was strange, unnatural, yet no one dared mock what they could not understand. Elders from the surrounding community occasionally visited the school for special ceremonies, and when they saw her, their eyes softened. They would nod subtly, placing their hands over their hearts, acknowledging a truth hidden from the modern world. Some muttered blessings in low tones, words meant for her ears alone. She carried herself like the land itself, silent, patient, enduring, yet alive with ancient power. The academy represented wealth, ambition, and fleeting pride, but she embodied something older, something eternal. She was a spirit tied to the soil beneath the towering walls, a reminder that the past whispered to those who listened, and that true strength came not from silver or gold, but from roots buried deep, unbroken, and unbowed. In her silence, the academy learned a lesson they could not yet name, that dignity, wisdom, and the quiet power of heritage were forces that no arrogance could undo. Every step she took was heavy, yet measured. Each whispered insult, each pointed glance, had been folded into her heart and turned into strength. Her suffering, once a weight pressing her to the ground, now grew roots, anchoring her spirit and shaping a quiet power that no laughter could shake. She had learned that true strength grows in the shadows of pain, silent but unstoppable. Sometimes, when she walked the quiet corridors alone, she felt it stirring beneath her calm, the secret that slept beneath her silence. It was as though the land itself whispered to her, calling out for something long forgotten, something ancient yet hers by right. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "One day they will see who you are. Wait, child, and they will understand." The day of the Academy's grand event arrived, the one where students from every corner were meant to shine. The hall glittered with lights, banners swaying like proud flags, the scent of polished wood and ambition thick in the air. But for her, this day became a stage set for humiliation. The rival stood at the center, draped in confidence like a queen in her coronation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice clear and sharp, "let us welcome the girl from the dust." Laughter erupted like a wave, rolling through the audience. The girl's eyes met the rival's once, and then she turned away, holding her head high. Around her, the crowd watched, hushed but complicit. Teachers did not intervene. Their silence was as heavy as the mocking that filled the room. Society, she realized, often failed those who needed justice most. And then the cruelest strike came. A careless comment, a dropped notebook, a reminder of her poverty laid bare, tattered shoes, worn uniform, a lunch bag not worthy of display in this hall of wealth. The audience leaned in as if to peer at her worthlessness, and every laugh became a hammer against her dignity. Her chest tightened, her throat raw from holding back the words she wanted to speak. For a heartbeat, the weight of every insult, every act of exclusion, pressed against her spirit. But she did not break. She drew on the power forged in shadows, on lessons whispered by elders, and on the roots buried deep beneath her feet. She would endure, and she would rise. Even in the breaking point of her silent heart, a flicker of something greater glimmered in her eyes, a promise that the story had only just begun, that the world's cruelty would one day meet the force it had sought to suppress. At home, the air felt heavier than usual. The scent of burning incense mingled with the faint aroma of herbs, but even their comforting presence could not mask the weakening of her grandmother. The elder sat by the window, sunlight casting long shadows across her lined face. Her breaths were shallow, her hands trembling as she clutched the wooden staff that had once carried her strength. "My child," she whispered, her voice hoarse but still firm, "listen carefully. There are roots in you that run deeper than the rivers, older than the hills, roots that the world has tried to forget." The girl knelt by her side, taking her grandmother's frail hand. "Grandmother, you will get better." "You always do," she said, though the knot in her stomach betrayed her fear. The grandmother's eyes glimmered with a fierce light, as if the spirit of their ancestors had filled her one last time. "No, it is not for me but for you," she said. "Our blood carries a duty. You are not just a girl from dust and shadows. You are tied to sacred truths, powers that were once honored and now lie forgotten. Never let them be lost again. The words, heavy and trembling, sank into the girl's heart. She felt the weight of responsibility, the power of lineage, and the echo of generations that had once walked these lands with pride. Outside, clouds gathered, thick and dark, rolling over the city that glittered with false grandeur. The wind whispered through the trees, a warning carried from ancestors who had watched quietly as their sacred lands were traded for gold and glass towers. A storm was rising, a storm that mirrored the turmoil in the girl's heart, and it promised that the world she knew would soon be upended. The day of the Grand Academy event arrived, sunlight spilling over the polished floors and banners fluttering in celebration. Yet, as the girl stepped into the hall, pride and anticipation twisted quickly into dread. The rival, poised like a viper ready to strike, waited in the spotlight, eyes gleaming with cruel certainty. The hall fell silent as the rival leaned forward, her voice slicing through the air. "Everyone, look closely. This is the girl who thinks she can stand among us. The girl whose shoes have walked through dust and poverty," she said, her words dripping with venom, "and yet dares to sit here in our halls." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eyes of the wealthy and powerful, of families and respected elders, fixed on the girl, measuring, judging, anticipating her collapse. The girl's chest tightened, her heart pounding like the drums of ancient ceremonies. "She thinks she belongs," the rival continued, her tone a sharpened blade, "but can one born of shadows truly hold the light?" The hall remained still. Words burned like fire across a silent crowd. Each accusation, each mocking claim, carved itself into the girl's spirit. And yet, even as shame and anger threatened to overwhelm her, the memory of her grandmother's final lesson clung to her soul, the knowledge that power lay not in wealth or applause, but in blood, in roots, and in unbroken dignity. The hall was quiet, though the silence weighed heavily, each heartbeat echoing like a drum in a deserted village square. Eyes followed her, some curious, some cruel, but none stepped forward. Even the teachers, guardians of rules and justice, watched without moving. It was a silence heavy with judgment and hidden shame, a reflection of a world too often afraid to act. The girl's hands trembled slightly, but she did not falter. She drew in a steady breath, remembering the words of her grandmother, "Your heart is your fortress. Let no one tear it down, even when the world bends against you." She straightened, chin high, carrying dignity like a shield. Her heart refused to break beneath the weight of ridicule, a quiet power growing with each insult hurled. A sudden shiver ran through her, as if the wind itself carried the whispers of her ancestors. Pain, humiliation, and longing swirled together, rising to the surface. Her eyes, usually calm, flared with something ancient, something that had been meant to sleep, now awakened. The air around her seemed to pulse, charged with invisible energy. Her spirit, tethered to the land of her forebears, began to glow in subtle ways. A low hum filled her ears, like a forgotten song being sung by generations long past. The blood of her ancestors rose within her, awakening the sacred power that had been hidden for so long. A tremor ran through the crowd. The hall itself seemed to bend in reverence. Whispers spread like wildfire as the truth began to surface. The girl was no ordinary child. Her name, once buried in the annals of history, now carried weight, honor, and fear. She was the descendant of guardians, keepers of wisdom, protectors of the land, voices that once commanded respect across kingdoms. Elders seated among the guests stiffened, recognition dawning on their faces. They leaned forward, murmuring names and tales from a time when her family had walked with authority and reverence. Teachers and students alike felt the shift, the weight of legacy pressing upon the present. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. The air itself stood still, thick with the presence of unseen watchers. The ancestors, invisible yet undeniably present, had returned to witness the awakening of their heir. A wave of awe rippled through the hall, leaving silence in place of chatter, and respect where mockery had once thrived. The girl exhaled slowly, her power no longer hidden. She felt it coursing through her, a river of strength and wisdom, a connection to the land, the past, and every soul who had come before her. In that moment, she was no longer alone. She was the living song of her ancestors, a bridge between forgotten traditions and a world that had yet to recognize them. A hush fell over the hall, so deep it seemed to press against the walls themselves. A soft wind from the open windows stirred, carrying the scent of earth and rain, and for the first time, even the proudest voices could not deny the signs before them. The girl's presence glowed with something unseen, a truth that could not be hidden. Her eyes, calm yet burning, held the weight of generations. The arrogance of the elite faltered, every mocking smile and whispered insult faded into a stunned silence. From the corners of the room, elders who had once walked beside her ancestors stepped forward, their faces lined with memory and respect. "She is of the blood we once served," one elder whispered, voice trembling with awe. Another nodded, holding his staff like a bridge between past and present. "The lineage endures," he said, "and it rises again through her." The girl's shoulders lifted, not with wealth, but with something far older, heritage, honor, and the weight of truth. Around her, invisible yet undeniable, the power of her ancestors seemed to crown her head. She was restored not with gold, not with silver, but with the recognition of legacy. She stood taller than the tallest throne, because her place was earned by blood, courage, and the truth that could not be silenced. The laughter that had once echoed through her halls like sharp knives died abruptly. The rich children who had mocked her felt the sudden heaviness of shame, realizing their pride had been built on nothing. The rival, whose arrogance had known no bounds, stepped back, her confidence crumbling like dry earth beneath a sudden storm. No shouting, no punishment was needed. The power had shifted quietly, inexorably, carried by truth itself. Where ridicule once ruled, respect now settled. Where mockery had filled the air, silence reigned, humming with the authority of justice long overdue. The girl, once invisible and whispered about, now commanded attention with a quiet force that left no room for doubt. She was no longer the poor girl or the outsider. She was a living emblem of strength, justice, and ancestral truth. Her eyes scanned the hall, calm and unwavering, and the room felt the weight of her presence, the presence of someone who could no longer be ignored. The morning after brought a new reality. The school awoke as if shaking off a long, shallow dream. Students and teachers looked around, hesitant, uneasy, and aware of the emptiness behind wealth when character is absent. One student murmured to another, "We have judged without knowing, laughed without thought." Teachers, too, held their heads a little lower, seeing their roles not merely as instructors, but as witnesses of something greater than pride or status. The community was forced to see with new eyes, eyes that recognized strength, wisdom, and heritage over gilded appearances. In the quiet reflection that settled over the halls, a lesson took root. Respect and truth are not granted, they are recognized when they cannot be denied. The morning sun filtered softly through the academy's windows, spilling light across halls that had once echoed with mockery. Now, there was a quiet reverence in the air. Students and teachers alike moved with cautious respect, their eyes following her not with sneers, but with recognition. Yet, she did not lift her chin in triumph, nor did she let their newfound admiration change her. Her presence alone spoke louder than any applause. Respect was given, not demanded, like rain after a long, harsh drought. She walked with steady steps, each one measured, each one calm. When a teacher offered her a nod of apology, she returned it with nothing but a gentle smile, a grace that carried more power than anger could ever give. "Thank you," she said quietly, and the words held neither pride nor malice, only the quiet dignity of one who knew her place in the world. Her rival, once untouchable, now stood frozen, surrounded by whispers and sidelong glances. The girl's eyes met hers briefly, not with hatred, but with a clarity that pierced deeper than any insult ever could. The rich girl's pride faltered as she felt the weight of public awareness pressing on her. Shame became her shadow, following every move, reminding her that arrogance built on cruelty could not stand. In the courtyard, students gathered to watch a lesson they would not forget. They saw that true strength did not lie in wealth, nor in sharp words or sharp tongues, but in the quiet knowledge of one's worth. She moved among them like a river, calm on the surface, carrying depths too strong to disturb. One boy whispered, "She does not need us to see her, she already knows herself." Even the rival, forced into reflection, began to understand. The laughter and mockery that had once filled the air were gone, replaced by an uncomfortable truth. Power without respect is hollow. Humility, she realized, was not weakness. It was the only path forward for those who wished to endure. Though her grandmother's hands were now still, and her voice a memory, the girl felt the guidance coursing through her actions. Every step she took, every choice she made, carried the echoes of wisdom passed down from the living and the departed alike. "Walk with honor, even when none are watching," her grandmother had said, and now those words shaped her entirely. By the day's end, the academy had changed. The corridors that had once felt like battlegrounds now carried the quiet murmur of reflection. The girl, neither boasting nor demanding, had become the measure by which others would learn the value of grace, patience, and true strength. And in that, her victory was complete. She walked through the academy gates with a calm that seemed to settle the air itself. Every step she took carried the weight of both worlds, the gleaming floors of modern learning beneath her feet, the unseen songs of her ancestors guiding her heart. Students watched silently, not with mockery, but with a quiet wonder, as if they sensed that she carried something more than education or wealth. She was walking between two worlds with steady feet, bridging the past and the present with a grace that could not be taught. In the quiet corners of the courtyard, she would often pause, touching the earth lightly, whispering words her grandmother had taught her. "Remember who you are, child," the wind seemed to carry. And she did. Her roots held firm beneath changing winds. Wealth could rise and fall, pride could twist and crumble, but the strength of her heritage could not be shaken. It was the pulse of the land itself flowing through her veins, reminding her that identity was more precious than gold. The classrooms became her stage, not for competition, but for showing that knowledge was a seed best nurtured with respect for the old ways. She approached every lesson with patience, every project with wisdom, and every challenge with quiet determination. A future built with wisdom, not just wealth, unfolded before her as she moved, teaching by example the power of balance. Where others chased recognition, she built bridges. Where others wielded power, she nurtured understanding. At the village council and in the academy halls alike, her story began to ripple. Elders spoke of her journey in hushed tones, as though recounting a tale older than memory itself. "This is the child who walked with dignity when all others mocked," they said. "She honors both the ancestors and the path forward." The story would be told for generations, a living lesson of patience, humility, and justice, of a heart that did not break even when the world tried to bend it. And in the quiet of her own mind, she remembered the words her grandmother had whispered one last time, "Gold fades, but roots remain." It was the truth that guided her every choice. In her, the past breathed alongside the future, and the strength of who she truly was shone brighter than any wealth, louder than any applause. True power, she had learned, lies not in what the world can give, but in knowing who you are and where you come from. The sun set over the academy, but in her heart, the light of her heritage and the promise of the future glowed eternal, a bridge between worlds, a lesson for all who would follow.